Hey, this is Mark at the Great Lakes Comic Con. I'm here with legendary comic book inker Mike Royer. How you doing, sir?
I'm having a ball. This is a great show, and it is still to this day surprising that people walk up who only know me as Jack Kirby or Russ Manning's inker. They don't know that I wrote and drew Hanna-Barbera comic books, things of that nature, and 21 years I was a character artist, product designer for Walt Disney character merchandise.
We know we're aware of that. Now tell me, how did you get started working with Gold Key on their Walt Disney line?
I was an Edgar Rice Burroughs fan and went to the World Science Fiction Convention in Oakland or Berkeley in 1964. Met Camille Cassis, who edited a fanzine called Herbdom, and I told him I loved Russ Manning's artwork. And he says, well, I'm going to go visit him. I'll tell him about you. Send him some samples. So I sent Russ some samples. 2 months later, because he was very busy, he wrote me back and he simply said, if I ever needed an assistant, you would be perfect. So I packed up my family, moved to Southern California, knocked on his door, and bless his heart, he gave me work.
Wow.
And as a result of working with Russ, there was a period in the first couple of years that Western Publishing, the Gold Key comic provider, wanted more work from Russ. And he said, the only way that I can give you more work is to have Mike working with me. I cannot pay him a living wage. So they called me and said, how would you like to come in and pick up some work? So I never had to show samples. They just said, come in and pick up some work, because they wanted more work from Russ Manning. And the first thing I did for Western Publishing was a Superboy frame tray puzzle, which I drew. And then it was painted by Wilson or one of the painters at Western Publishing in New York City.
Wow. Now, then you did some of the Tarzan stuff, right?
Well, I worked with him on the comic books.
Dad was a big collector and fan of that stuff.
Let me draw the Tarzan Twins issue, and which has some good art in it and some bad art, but I was learning. When Russ finally got the syndicated comic strip, I assisted him on that in the beginning, and then returned many years later after Jack, because I stopped working with Jack only because I wanted to stretch other muscles, you know.
But how did you get hooked up with Jack?
I'm walking from the studio, which I had built at the back of the garage. The phone is ringing in the kitchen. I run in and go, hello, and it's Mike Royer, this is Jack Kirby. Alex Toth says you're a pretty good inker. So he called me.
And you worked with him on that Fourth World material.
I actually did work for Jack for 10 years, but only 9 years of it is the Fourth World and then the later Marvel stuff. So people think that's when I started. When I say 10 years, they start doing the math, and it's like, well, I did all kinds of stuff with Jack. And what he found in me was what he was looking for. Somebody on the West Coast who could ink, and then the bonus, the fact that I could letter. So he would be totally in charge of his work. So when he left Marvel and went to D.C., I got a phone call from Maggie Thompson saying, hey, what's this I hear that Jack has left? And I said, he has? He left Marvel? She says, I don't know anything about it. Then later I got a call from Jack saying, well, you probably heard the news. You were supposed to be part of the package. But they said, who's this Royer kid? It's because they had to deal with Vince Coletta, you know. And so it took the first 4 issues of the Fourth World books for him to convince them that he wanted his inker. And so they said yes, because I'm sure they figured that I would fail. And to their chagrin, I didn't. I am the only inker that ever kept up with everything Jack produced.
That's incredible. That's something to be proud of.
People have told me that they witnessed a conversation once between Joe Sinnott and Frank Giacoia when they were trying to figure out, how does that kid ink 3 pages a day?
Then after you worked with Jack, you started working for Disney.
Well, just before Disney, I started working with Russ again on the Tarzan and Star Wars strip. So for 13 to 20 weeks, I worked on both strips, totally inked and lettered everything. And he was in a story already in the Tarzan Sunday pages, but when he started the very last continuity, he signed all the pages Manning and Royer, which was nice. And the 13 weeks of Star Wars, I inked that. But I just wasn't getting the body of work from Russ that was the living I wanted to make. And I got a phone call from a buddy that says, hey, do up some samples. They're looking for somebody at Disney in their foreign strip division. So I went in and picked up a couple of assignments, and they called me one day and said, how would you like to come in and talk about your life or something, you know? And so I thought to myself, oh, they're going to give me a regular gig inking one of the strips for King Features. I went in and the guy says, how would you like to come on staff? And as the hard-boiled detective would say in a radio show in 1942, in less time than it takes to tell, I said yes.
The rest was history.
So I was on staff in creative services for consumer products.
That was great stuff.
And this is the guy who always wanted to, when he grew up, draw stuff like Tarzan, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, you know. And I found out that my true ability was funny animals. People have asked me, were you influenced by Jack when you went to Disney? Absolutely. In my head, Jack was always over my shoulder saying, do it your way, tell a story. And everything I drew, even if it was one character, two characters, it's like something taken right out of a story. And so the best creative work I ever did was at Disney. And the last 7 years, where primarily was an independent contractor, I quit the staff job. I didn't like some of the politics. And within 36 hours, the Disney stores called and said, please work for us. You don't have to come in. You can fax everything. You'll never be out of work. So for 7.5 years, it was the most creative and financially rewarding time of my entire career. They bought everything I sent them, whether they produced it or not. And I did some large group scenes that when I took them in, the art director would say, damn, these are so good, we ought to put these into print and sell them for $5,000 a portfolio. And I went, does that mean I can rewrite my invoice? And he says, no. But writers will say that, well, how do you do your books? And they say, well, at some point the character just takes over and writes it for me. You've heard that, haven't you?
Yeah, it's a natural process.
Well, I worked a whole bunch of scenes that were like 16 by 22 with all of the Pooh characters with the exception of Gopher. And I just, in my rough, just took the sheet of paper and just started in the center. And then when I was finished, I sat back and went, damn, did I do this? Because it worked from a design standpoint. It wasn't hinky, it wasn't weird, it worked. And I'll swear that it's Jack behind me saying, do it your way, tell a story. And this damn scene tells a story. Every one of the characters is making homemade Christmas presents. I did 3 of them. And even though they were plush animals, plush toys, I did once a big group scene where they're out camping. Pooh is in the background, can't figure out how to put the tent together. Tigger's in the foreground with a pile of burnt matches. He's striking the match on his rum and he can't get the fire started. Eeyore's got bags full of twigs and stuff for the fire. And in the background, running through the bushes, you see Piglet running with a roll of toilet paper and a shovel. I discovered that my bag was Bigfoot. And surprisingly, doing Bigfoot made me a better artist with regular straight stuff.
Now tell us, have you been working on anything lately?
Thanks to fans of my work, I do some commissions now and then. I do some recreations, but I do not do a slavish reproduction. So that when I sign them at the bottom, instead of saying recreated such and such, I go revisited by. Because I do little changes, little things different. Especially when somebody has me do a page, lots of those speed lines. It's like making them exactly the same will drive you crazy. So they get the speed lines, but they're not exactly the same speed lines because it's the way you do them, and to duplicate how the ink runs together from the thick to the thin, it's different. And no longer do slavish recreations. Somebody sent me once a pencil drawing that Jack did, a pinup of is it Prince Tufton and Commandy? Well, it was a nice drawing, but I went back to the first appearance of Tufton, and it's now Jack's drawing, but I put one of the other legs that works better if it's to just the single pose, and he's wearing the uniform and the epaulets and the pistol holster that he had in his first appearance, which is not in the drawing that Jack did. But you take an artist that creates these successful characters, and there's an evolution, and eventually it's the character, but it doesn't have exactly everything he had the first time you saw him. But to me, I wanted Tufton to be Tufton with the epaulets and all the other stuff that I just can't help myself.
Anyways, Mike, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but it was a pleasure speaking with you, and hopefully you have a great convention and a lot of people coming to see you.
Well, guys, I'm flattered and honored that you wanted to talk to me.
Anytime. Again, this is Mark at the Great Lakes Comic-Con with this legendary inker, Mike Royer.
Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko?